welcome to the next episode of Endoscopy Essentials, where I have the enormous pleasure to welcome my old friend Guido Costamagna. Welcome, Guido.
Thank you, Thomas.
We want to talk about life, endoscopy, and how this is interconnected. So maybe we can start with a short bio. You are from northern Italy.
Yeah.
How did you end up in medicine? And surgery,
yes.
by the way.
And surgery at the beginning.
At the beginning.
Yes, actually, I was born on Lake Como because I was born in August, and my family still has a nice house on Lake Como, and so I was born there, close to the Swiss border, very close.
Is there some
2
Swiss
kilometers.
influence? Maybe.
There is some
Yeah.
Swiss influence because my grandfather was born in Zurich, lived many years in Berlin, and then back to Zurich where he went to the university, to the Polytechnique. He graduated in Zurich. He went to the conservatorium in Zurich with the great Busoni in the 20s.
Yeah.
And then, but he was 100% Italian, but his culture is German, was German, absolutely. So there is an influence.
There is an influence.
Yes.
And did you always want to do medicine, or was it just last minute?
No. Not always, but since the secondary schools, I mean, I was quite convinced that I wanted to be a doctor. Yes. So I grew up. I was born in Como. I grew up in Milano. Then I lived in Belgium for 2 periods of 5 years in a whole, with another period in Italy, and then I got my high school degree in Brussels at the European School. Because my family was living in Brussels. And at that time, the situation of medical schools in Italy was a lot chaotic. It was 71, so just after the 68 revolution. And there was only one university with a numerus clausus, which was the Catholic University in Rome, where my grandparents lived. So I had some, some connection already with Rome. But and I didn't want to study in Brussels because the idea of studying medicine in one place, I thought it was a little bit too linking to the place afterwards, and so I wanted to. My idea was to come back to Italy, and therefore I did the application for this medical school. We were only 120 per year, and I won, and I went to Rome, and since then I'm there.
With some period being in Brussels again.
Of course,
right?
yes, because Brussels is my second city, my second.
Yeah. I wasn't aware that
country.
you were there before, so
Yes,
it was
yes,
just
yes.
like
I
coming
was
back.
the first time in 1960. I was 8 years old, and we stayed 3 years. Then we came back to Italy, to Milano, and then the last 2 years of high school again at the European school.
And then you went into surgery first after graduation.
Yes, actually, I did my final presentation for the degree in gynecology. It was a lab work where I learned a lot methodology in lab, and very interesting. But then I thought that it was not my turf, so I decided to shift to surgery. And again, I had to look around because in my university at that time we didn't have a a postgraduate course in general surgery. We had also only vascular surgery and urology. And finally, I got the postgraduate course in another university in Rome, in La Sapienza, the oldest one. But at that time, you were not obliged to be there every day. So I was working at the Gemelli and passing the examinations, the lessons at the Sapienza.
Sapienza is the wisdom.
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not a bad start as a surgeon.
Yes. So this was my beginning. But then endoscopy. Endoscopy is strange because at that time bleeders were surgical.
Hard to imagine, but yeah.
Yes. Because the internal medicine the doctors and specialists didn't want to see too much blood. So bleeders, upper GI bleeders and also lower GI bleeders were surgical. And therefore, some of my younger mentors, let's say, were doing gastroscopy, mainly in emergency, but also in routine practice. And I learned to do some upper GI endoscopy.
What was surgery consisting of? If you have an unclear bleeding, how was the diagnosed?
Just to detect the site of bleeding and decide which kind of surgery.
Okay, and then withdraw, and then
yes,
okay.
We had some needle maybe, but
and there was suturing or resection or
yes, suture, resection, whatever.
Oh.
It was the aim was mainly to see if it was an active bleeding, and if yes, which kind of bleeding and which kind of surgery could be applied. But my main interest was in biliary surgery, and the main problem was forgotten stones in the bile duct.
After cholecystectomy.
After cholecystectomy, which meant at that time reoperation. Disaster, total disaster. And we are speaking about the late 70s, 79, 80, yes, 80. And therefore we decided that we had to move forward. And endoscopic sphincterotomy was gaining not only success, but also visibility. And being the youngest, they decided that it was me, the one they had to see around and to try to start this kind of activity.
But Guido, just so the bleeding was the door opener, and then it was the bile duct stones. The guys who felt this is a totally inappropriate approach to operate on those patients, was this a very small minority, like
it
the
was
front
a very
fighters
small,
and the others thought such a rubbish? And
yes, it was a very small minority, but
so you had to go away.
I had to go somewhere to learn. Somebody in my hospital had already tried to, but without any kind of training, so they failed totally. ERCP, you cannot start like this.
Reading a book and starting. No. Yeah. And there was
so
no YouTube and nothing.
I did a bit of sort of what we call today benchmarking. Where to go? Mm-hmm. There were not many places at that time. The choice was between Munich, Anna Class and the group, Hamburg, Nipsuendra, Claude Digori in Paris, Peter Cotton, who at that time was still at the Middlesex in London, Amsterdam, or Brussels.
That was about it, huh? For the prominent centers. Yeah. In all over Europe.
More or less. Oh, Marseille. Je les sais.
Maybe we forgot a very few ones, but
Yes,
not many more than 10.
we certainly forget somebody. But these were the leading centers for ERCP. And so Brussels, I said, "Well, Brussels is home," because my parents still lived in Brussels at that time. And therefore, I decided to try to meet Michel Kremer. And in March 81, he came to give a lecture in Naples. So I took my car, I went to Naples, listened to the lecture, and then at the end of the lecture, I presented myself speaking in French with a Belgian accent. So he was absolutely surprised. And I asked him if it was possible to go to Brussels to see, to understand, to learn. And after 2 months, I was there.
So he readily accepted you, and
Immediately, yes.
were there any, licensing problems, or you just went there and started working?
Nothing. It was very easy at that time.
It was pretty European then,
Yes,
you can go to another country.
No problem at all. So I went there and I started watching with a teacher. No,
Before
of
the
course,
video
no
area.
video.
Yeah.
No. The teacher, and my main problem was the pancreas, because the biliary anatomy, I knew the biliary anatomy because of intraoperative or peroperative cholangiography. So I was able to understand the tumoral stone, the intrahepatic stones, or whatever. But the pancreas for me was absolutely night, dark, the dark side of the moon. So I used to spend all the afternoons after the end of the session. I went in this room, which was where they dictated the report of the examinations, and I started looking at the X-rays and reading the reports to understand and to match for hours. And then at the end of the afternoon, I usually felt a strange presence behind me. This was Michel Kremer, who at the end of all his activity, outpatients clinic and whatever, he came back and he used to sit beside me. And we start explaining.
Well, it was
Again,
one-to-one teaching by the master.
Again, Thomas, for hours. We both forgot the to check, and sometimes the telephone in the room rang. It was Corinne calling him, "Michel, come because your soup is ready." It was 9:30 in the evening, or
Fascinating.
very often. Yes,
Yeah.
no.
So this
He
must
really
have
was a
been-
great teacher.
Must have been a super fast track, right? If you want to accumulate this knowledge, it takes you years
Yeah.
under normal circumstances.
No, I was very lucky.
Oh.
I was
Okay.
very, very lucky. But of course, he could probably perceive my so intense interest to learn, and that
Which might have been unusual even at those times. People look back and say, "Oh, the young generation isn't so intense and they don't want to work so much." Maybe it was not so different. There were just some individuals who stood out and were very dedicated, and maybe not so much has changed, I sometimes think, because they are still very, very much ambitious young guys. And anyway, so this brings us maybe to the main topic we wanted to discuss, because I was listening to an online lecture of you about 2 years ago, my advice to the next generation.
Yes.
Both of us are in a certain age where considerations about mentoring get into the forefront.
Yeah.
And if you agree, we go through, there are 6 advices.
Yes.
you gave, and I may read them, and we talk about it. So the first one is, and it really mirrors your history, Nemo Profeta in Patria.
Yes.
That means you have probably to leave your place and perhaps come back in triumph, but you have to change places. If you are just in one place all the time, then is that still valid?
I think it's still valid, but I was mainly remembering my experience when I came back from Brussels the first time. My period of training in Brussels lasted more than 2 years, 2.5 years more or less. But I came back for periods to try to set up the in between. So and in March '82, I did my first ERCP in Rome, but it was during the night because I had no X-ray room. So we were obliged to work after the others, so during the night. And we were four people. Very good friend of mine, radiologist, who became afterwards a very well-known neuroradiologist, but at that time he was very much concerned with GI radiology, Cesare Corosimo. Another friend that was just who just graduated as a doctor, and a student from Africa, Eritrean student, Gebre Zabiher. And we had to do everything. No anesthesiologist, of course, no nurses.
Sedation was by
me, Valium.
Valium. Yeah. Okay.
Diazepam. No anesthesiology, no nurses. Nobody. We were alone. We had to take the patients from the wards to the radiology ourselves and to bring back them to the wards. So we started like this.
So
and my idea,
you came like from a different star, right?
yes,
into that surgical world.
Because there was no room for us. I mean, it was something that was totally new, and it took time until people realized that something was happening. And this happened when I started doing some sphincterotomy. In my mind, I wanted to perform 100 diagnostic ERCPs and then go. But actually, I did it before the 100. And I started with the easiest, acute cholangitis. Acute suppurative cholangitis, even better. Good, nice orifice with some pus, okay?
Immediate benefit.
Immediate benefit. So I remember that people, most of them were quite old, were dying of sepsis in the medical wards, dying, because surgery had 40% of mortality also. And I remember even the name of the patient.
The first
His
one.
name was Andreotti. Nothing to do with the politician, the very well-known Italian politician that dominated the scene during 40 years. And his name was Andreotti, and he was dying of sepsis. So we brought him down. I did the sphincterotomy, pass, and the following day, after he was dying the night before, he was playing cards with a guy, with a mate. And this changed something because the nurses in the medical ward said,
What's that?
"What's that? What happens? It's a miracle." And this changed the attitude of the doctors toward us, and we became visible.
So this was the arrival of the prophet.
Yes.
And
But
the acknowledgement.
At least we became visible. From the night, we
From the night to the day.
to the light of the day. Still without a room dedicated to us, but it was a first step towards recognition and of something new happening.
And then slowly you got
And then
into
slowly,
medical
yes.
routine.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But I think that mainly applies to really groundbreaking stuff, right? So if you learn a
Yes.
technique which is a little bit different and doesn't change so much,
No.
you might not have to go somewhere. But okay,
But that's
Nemo.
why I choose the name of prophetic patri.
Yeah.
Because I remember that I was not a prophet.
Yeah, but the procedure was kind of prophetic, or at least a
Absolutely.
game
Yes.
changer.
Yes. Game change. Yeah, totally. Totally.
Absolutely.
Look now.
Yeah.
Surgery is no
Nobody
more
would
wrong.
ever, yeah,
No.
operate. Okay, then your next sentence is kind of the contrary. So there's a big innovation. Maybe not all innovation is big. And the sentence is, not all that glitters is golden.
Be aware.
Yes.
Because everybody is fascinated by something new coming out, some technology or technique. But if you look back, and we of our generation look back at all the new technologies and technique that have been thrown into the market and into the potentially daily use, how many have failed? A lot.
But how would you advise to recognize? Is there the clinical
Of
need
course, it's
missing,
difficult.
or
I think that we have to be serious and evaluate always seriously with clinical studies, even if they are not the top of the methodology with randomized control and blah blah blah, but solid data, honest data, which is difficult sometimes to find.
very true?
And then of course and try to participate in the creation of this data, so be part, try to be part.
I think that's very important. And maybe this has also to do with the fact or the advice, if there is something new, don't link your name and personality too much with it.
Of course, yes.
Because you should be the first one to learn if the procedure is not so golden, right?
Yeah, but sometimes it's difficult because of our ego, who is always
Yeah.
a little bit
There has to be
too
some ego.
hypertrophic.
Yes, yeah.
So
It's a
modesty is another important
it's a fine
point.
line, but sometimes it's a difficult decision because sometimes perseverance is important. If you believe in something, so you have to go on despite initial failures. So to find out what's really a game changer. But if you take an obvious example, which I think you also cited, is the endoscopic anti-reflux technique.
Yes.
Do you think they will ever come back, or were people expecting too much gold, so we can do 60% and that's it?
I think. I think so. I mean, there are some techniques that are now validated with robust data coming from the literature, and I think that there is some value in very selected patients concerning reflux. But for instance, all patients that are dominated by one symptom, regurgitation, which is not well controlled by PPIs or whatever. So there is still room, I think, and I see more and more young people with problem of reflux. I don't know if it's also your experience, but I see a lot of young people with reflux and severe reflux. So there is room to go on. For sure, we have done a lot of things that were not useful. And if you look back at the studies, also the randomized studies versus sham procedure versus placebo, it's incredibly high. The response to placebo is 40%, which means that also the selection of patients is difficult. It's very difficult.
But where should some young enthusiastic endoscopist go? He discovers this technique, it's heavily marketed. It's difficult, right? So you either have people who say it's rubbish but don't explain it, or people who say it's
No, I think that if you are very much involved in this area, there are some techniques already available and probably some that are developing that may be interesting. But you must be very honest with the patients and very serious in selecting the good indications. The good indication is not the patient that do not respond to PPIs. That's the worst indication.
Like in surgery.
Like in surgery.
Like in
of
surgery.
course.
So maybe one thing I like, especially in your reply, do studies. Just objectivize.
Try to objectivize and try to be part, or even if you are not part, but nowadays we know that we can go to the registries of studies. We know exactly what they are doing. Try to reproduce the study yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That means that you are involved psychologically in doing things right.
Okay, so of course I like the research reply for obvious reasons. Next step is be ready to change your mind, which is the same from another perspective.
Exactly. Yes. At the same time, we have been very lucky in our generation because we have assisted that real revolution in several fields: hepatobiliary, pancreatic, enormous, but also the evolution of endoscopy as a treatment, or luminal endoresection, or now all the stuff related to metabolic disease, which is another huge amount of patients. And so we have to keep an eye on that and be ready to change, in the sense that, of course, it's not gold all that glitters, but be attentive to what happens around you.
So next of year number 4, statement number 4 is think out of the box. How do you do that? Do you go to other specialties or?
Yes, I think that today, but in the last probably 20 years, this concept of multidisciplinary medicine, and not only medicine, but also multidisciplinary collaboration with engineers, chemistry specialists, physics, and whatever, has been developed a lot, which was not the case at the beginning. So this is also shown by the number of medical schools that are linked to an engineer school, more and more in the world, at least in Italy, a lot, but also
In
all the
other
other
countries
countries
as well, right?
So that means that there is a different way of looking at things, probably not only from what I remember a few years ago. I tried to understand what was going on in other fields in Italy in terms of research and but upfront research, and I discovered a lot of realities, but real solid realities, in southern Italy. Because I was focused in south of Rome. Incredible that I didn't know. So I discovered that we had specialists in chemistry in Bari that were able to link any kind of molecule to a piece of plastic. The ergonomics and the mechatronics in Naples is top of the level in the world. There was a guy in Benevento, which is a small town close to Naples, that was one of the superstars of optoelectronics in the world. So if you don't look around you, you may be looking for forever to something that exists
Yeah,
in the
already.
door.
So, but it
But
then,
also in your own hospital or university or
so it doesn't only mean think out of the box within endoscopy. It means leave
No,
the
no.
box of endoscopy.
Yes.
And it could also mean go into people who do research about the pathophysiology of disease, like obesity. Is it really
course.
the only way to imitate surgery to make the stomach smaller, or are there other ways?
A
Which
lot
we
of other
which we
ways.
could which we could
No, but
serve much better.
think only to artificial intelligence today, which is the hot topic of the century. No, artificial intelligence is not something medical.
That's
Something
right. But it's a very good example because many of your statements, not all that glitters is gold, especially, but change your mind, apply to artificial intelligence. It's one of the most fascinating areas with lots of ups and downs. Now we come to something more concrete. Statement number 5 is that certain things, or maybe most things, if they are sophisticated, should be done in high volume centers.
Yeah.
That's not a problem in some European countries, but it's a huge problem in others. Any advice? I mean, the advice would be to young people, go to a high volume center and don't get you convinced to train yourself in something in a small volume center.
Again, it's I think that very often it's a question of ego. If you work in a small center, which is probably as important as being in a big center, or sometimes very more important because you are the only one for the people around you that can do something. Don't try to do difficult things if you are not if you have not the recruitment that allows you to be really competent in this thing. But establish good relationship with the big center that is close to you. So don't be too egoistic, but share and collaborate and go there to see to also to create your probably with the years your own environment. But don't try to do things. It's clear now in surgery, but also in endoscopy it comes more and more clear that the volume is of paramount importance for the outcomes, and in surgery, especially in oncologic surgery, for the mortality and morbidity. But I think in the next future it will be forbidden to do something. At least now in surgery, it's already forbidden to do one pancreatic duodenectomy or 2 pancreatic or 5 pancreatic duodenectomy in 1 year. It's not acceptable.
It's very obvious in surgery, but with the more sophisticated endoscopic techniques, it's absolutely the same. And we also have those
Absolutely,
data.
yes. So it's
But there's work to be done, and the further you get south, and Germany is very south in that respect, the more difficult it appears to be.
Yes, but I think that this is a message that we should give and a strong message, because we see I see at least not every day, but very often. I talk about normal thing, a big polyp of the rectum. Okay, the guy who tries to remove the polyp, and then when he's half of the work, he stops because he's not able to, or he's afraid of bleeding, or this is a disaster.
It makes the situation much more difficult.
Of course, because you create a difficulty that is not there if you send the patients to somebody who is able to do it. So that's every day, because, oh, it's a polyp. Okay, I can remove it. No. No,
I think the message should be loud and clear, and then the rest is politics and how we incorporate it into daily practice.
But today you can send the patient. I mean, Italy is a difficult geographical country because you have the mountains in between the Adriatic and Mediterranean Sea. It's a long peninsula. But today, if you want to send a patient, to refer a patient, it's so easy. It's so easy. It's not, we are not in the 50s or in the 60s.
Okay, the last statement I like also very much, be generous.
Yeah,
In all respects, or?
in all respects. Why be generous? Because if you are generous, you receive generosity. It's like that. I mean, I've been very lucky to meet people like Michel Cremer and also other mentors that I had before and after in surgery, and friends like you and the group that we have, Jacques, Horst, Paul, and we have Thierry. We have grown together, no? And we have been always generous between us, or not?
Of course, no, absolutely. So maybe, you know, with the,
So
with the-
if you teach, if you are not um, keeping for you, to be generous, you have to be also. I don't know the terms if it's correct in English. Presuntuoso. Uh, you teach, but you remain the best. So there is no competition, because if you this was what I thought when I started the ERCP in Rome. The first guy who asked me to come was the guy who was working in the hospital 4 kilometers from the Gemelli. I said, of course, come. He came, he looked, he started, but all the complications, all the difficult cases were for me.
And in
So-
fact, if you're a good teacher, you master the technique absolutely. Because if you are nervous and you don't master the technique, then you are not a good teacher. So that's maybe the core of that message. Okay, Guido, we are almost at the end. But you retired from your original position, but you're
Yes.
still in medicine.
So I retired because I'm old. So academically, we have a limit in Italy, and so I left the chair of surgery. I was still full professor of surgery. In the meantime, I became a gastroenterologist as well.
That's also important to stress at the end of this conversation, yes?
However, I was full professor of surgery, and now I'm retired from this position. But just at the same moment, we took the responsibility of another hospital in Rome, which is one of the oldest hospitals
In the
Rome.
heart of Rome, right?
In the heart of Rome, on the island, the only island on the Tiber, l'isola Tiberina. It's something unbelievable. You have to come to see it, because we have a temple of the 2nd century before Christ in the radiotherapy department. The ruins of the temple visible like this. This is
That's
only
Rome.
one of the much smaller than the Gemelli, but it's called Gemelli Isola, and we are running this hospital since a little bit more than 1 year. They asked me to have an eye on several units, also the endoscopy, of course, but also digestive surgery, endocrine surgery, proctology, and what else? And a small unit of gastroenterology and diabetology, endocrinology.
So obesity is one of the areas.
Oh, I decide when I go.
Yeah.
That's the only difference. I know I have no more academic and applicacy, which were at the end a little bit too much. So I'm dedicated to the clinical work, organization, of course, looking also at the budgets, whatever, but at my pace, which makes a difference. And then when I go there, I just have to go along the Tiber for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's another thing. There are small restaurants just before, just around.
That sounds wonderful.
So I'm enjoying. Until I'm enjoying, I will stay. Try to stay. Maybe next morning they say, "Okay, goodbye. Thank you very much."
Well, Guido, that's wonderful. That was a wonderful conversation. The end was like "To Rome with Love," like the
Yes.
title of the movie. And I can only thank you very much.
No,
And
I
it was very
thank you
enjoyable.
because it was a very nice opportunity to
To look into the past and
to look
into the
into the
future.
past and to renovate also our friendship.
Thank you very much.